felt positively apocalyptic. There's an interesting kind of historical footnote to the story of Club Fuck, which is that for a while it was hosted by a bar called Le Barcito, the French Le being the same basically as a rainbow flag to say that Barcito was gay. Le Barcito was raided by the Los Angeles police in 1967. Its customers fought back and protested. This led to the formation of lesbian and gay activism in California and predates Stonewall, which is known as the watershed event in the creation of gay and lesbian liberation movements, by 2 years. So Club Fuck was happening in the same space. So notable performers and artists from the Club Fuck years include Catherine Opie and Ron Athey. And then I'm not sure that you will recognize these names, but Julie Tolentino, her collaborator Pigpen, and Cross, who's a piercing artist, were all parts of that scene, and I'm going to show some images of their work. So I've just got some images from the scene here. So Ron Athey actually got his start making artwork as a participant in the kind of punk and death metal music scenes outside of Los Angeles in the suburbs. He first started making performance art in music clubs. So these are images from Club Fuck. There was recently an exhibit celebrating its 20th anniversary. And that's an image of Ron Athey dancing. He was a go-go dancer at Club Fuck on the right. So, and one of the important things about some of these queer spaces to remember is these are not gay bars, meaning there are men and women there, and there are men and women there, and there are transgendered people there, and they're there for many different reasons. There's been, in the United States, and I think in Europe, a revival of burlesque, for example. And some of those burlesque performers performed at Club Fuck and come from those years. I sort of posit that, in a way, Club Fuck is perhaps the Studio 54 for the LA queer underground. Studio 54 being the nightclub that Andy Warhol and all the glamorous people in New York went to. And Club Fuck was, for 3 years, this for the queer underground and body art scene in Los Angeles. Another sort of figure from this is Vaginal Davis. I have some images of Vag later. But I wanted to show that out of Club Fuck comes a kind of curatorial impulse. So Ron Athey was collaborating with the artist Vaginal Davis, who I'll talk about later, on an event called GIMP, G-I-M-P, which means it's a very rude word for like handicapped. It suggests that you're missing a limb. And this was a night of performance art and music. So these are just 2 posters from it. I want to talk about this piece because I want to talk about queer invitation in a different way, which is through the relationship of Ron Athey to Julie Tolentino. So Julie Tolentino was one of the co-founders of the Clit Club, where I began, a queer feminist space in New York. She is a dancer and choreographer and performance artist. She's been doing a piece called The Sky Remains the Same, in which she's been archiving dance and performance and theater pieces in movement. So each work looks different, and they are never really literal repetitions of the performance that she's archiving. When she approached Ron Athey about archiving Resonate, Obliterate, self-obliteration solo, these are 2 images from a fairly long performance. Athey told her, "Why wait?" Meaning, why don't you do it with me? There's been a wave of reenactments in performance art, where artists are reenacting their own work, in which artists are reenacting the work of other people's. I've never seen someone be invited to reenact a work as it's unfolding in front of them. So there's about a 10-minute lag. So in this piece, Athey begins with a long blonde wig, and he's on all fours, and he combs the hair, and he combs it with force. So the brush is slamming down on the ground with each time he's doing it. This long, beautiful blonde hair, and he sits up on his heels, and he slowly takes the wig off. And as he does so, you realize that the whole time the wig has actually been pinned to his scalp, and blood starts to come down his face. And there's a series of movements which involve the glass sheets here that are quite difficult, where he's laying on his back and he's moving these glass sheets over each other over his body. So I'd seen Ron Athey do it alone, and then I saw Julie Tolentino do the performance with him, and was deeply moved by the level of commitment that she was showing to him by participating in this piece. There's a story here that comes to the surface around gender that's you can't miss, because she's smaller, and the whole piece is much more difficult for her. She bleeds more profusely than he does. But knowing something about their relationship, which goes back many, many years, and involves a lot of collaboration between the two, it's also deeply moving when you understand that in this piece they're working through the challenges of queer collaboration, right? And collaborating often under difficult circumstances outside of beautiful theaters, where you have wonderful technical staff helping you to realize things, and where you're often actually paying to do the work. They have a long history of this. And Julie Tolentino was a part of his company when they performed in Minneapolis and became the center of this scandal. Right. So while on one level Ron Athey has certainly paid a price for having been the artist behind that event, that being in the middle of a national scandal like that had a negative impact on 16 people, many of whom were also artists. Tolentino has a very soft work by comparison to that, called A Story About Two People, which I've always understood as an embodiment of her relationship to the various different spaces that she's committed to. In this piece, she dances with people one at a time for 24 hours while blindfolded. So another figure in this environment, right, which is comes out of gay bars, it comes out of sex clubs, it comes out of fetish clubs, but it turns into something else, is Vaginal Davis, who used to live in Los Angeles and now lives in Berlin. So for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of encountering Vaginal Davis, she is very tall, like I don't know centimeters, but like 6'7", 6'6". She's very, very tall. Yeah, and she likes to say that she's a very tiny, tiny, tiny little woman. So she's this incredible combination of incredibly delicate, but sort of delicate like your grandmother was delicate. You know, there's a sort of a nuance, a light touch, but you know that there's still a lot of strength there. Vaginal Davis has hosted several clubs over the years in Los Angeles that have been real proving grounds, laboratories for experimental performance art. So this is a place called Club Sucker, which was largely focused on rock and roll, but there was performance embedded in this. And Vaginal Davis was always performing in this, often ending up half naked, with people sucking on her toes. or receiving worship from her audience.